I have been an archivist at the Sorven Grand Conclave for 14 years. I have sat in the press gallery through 6 constitutional amendments, 2 succession disputes, and 1 session that ran for 11 days without recess. I have watched bodies vote, argue, capitulate, and collapse. I have never seen a chamber stop breathing. I saw it once. The severance crisis, as they called it, had been building for 3 years before it reached the floor. The human diplomatic presence across the conclave's territory had fractured over what the conclave's member delegates like to call jurisdictional irreconcilability. A phrase that, in my 14 years, had always meant one thing: too many voices, not enough, they agreed to say. Earth's envoys across the 7 posted missions had been filing competing procedural instruments, issuing contradictory transit notifications, submitting duplicate corridor registrations that crossed each other at the authorization layer. It was, by every objective measure, a mess. The conclave had not manufactured the crisis. I want to be clear about that. They had not needed to. What they had done, and this I recorded into the gallery's official log at the time, was take the mess and use it. The dissolution of the fragmented human diplomatic corpus, as presiding arbiter Sorven Sorel formally titled the resolution, passed on a vote of 31-9, with 4 abstentions. It declared the Earth mission's 7 posted envoys administratively defunct. Their credentials were suspended. Their filings were flagged for review. Their assigned seats were declared vacated. The conclave's legal chamber issued an interpretive note the following morning, clarifying that the dissolution did not affect Earth's underlying treaty rights, only its standing to exercise them while fragmented. There was a procedure to reconstitute standing, the note said. Earth was welcome to use it. The procedure required a unified filing, a single credentialed instrument, signed by all recalled envoys, submitted through the conclave's central intake channel. The legal chamber estimated, based on historical precedent, that assembling such a filing across 7 missions spanning 4 systems would take somewhere between 14 months and 2 years. I logged that estimate too. The closing ceremony was brief. Presiding arbiter Sorel read the dissolution order into permanent record. The 7 vacant seat plaques were formally turned face down on the floor, and the conclave adjourned what it was calling the severance session. The chamber gallery was half empty. Most delegates had already left for their midday meal. The crisis, they had decided, was administratively resolved. That was at 11:42 in the morning. At 11:58, the chamber doors opened. I heard them before I saw them. Not because of any commotion. There was none. What I heard was footsteps. A single cadence. 7 people walking in the same rhythm, the same pace, the same measured stride. Not in formation, not in ceremony. Just in step with each other. The way that people move when they have agreed, without speaking, exactly where they are going. Senior envoy Kala Vorn led them in. She had been the posting in the first mission, the one with the longest standing. Behind her came Delegate Adoran Osei, then Maret Solis from the 3rd mission, then 4 others I had only known from their filing signatures. They were dressed plainly. No ceremonial robes, no mission insignia. Plain work coats, the kind you wear when you do not intend to be ceremonial. They walked to the floor. The delegates who had stayed were still at their stations. Some were reviewing notes from the session. One was speaking quietly to an aide. Presiding arbiter Sorel had risen from his chair but had not yet crossed to the corridor. He turned when the doors opened. He watched. Kala Vorn stopped at the center of the floor, the position reserved for credentialed parties making formal address. The 6 behind her stopped in the same moment, not because she signaled them, because they already knew. Sorel said, "The severance session is closed. This floor is not convened." Vorn placed a document on the address table. She did not unfold it. She did not indicate what it contained. She set it down the way you set something down that has already done its work. "We have filed," she said. Sorel looked at the document. He looked at the 7 of them. Then he looked at the conclave's senior archivist, Davin Orel, who was standing to the left of the record desk. Davin Orel had been in his position for 22 years. I had watched him receive emergency filings, constitutional challenges, and one authenticated dissolution order from a member sovereign that had ceased to exist the week prior. He moved to the address table, lifted the document, and read the cover sheet. He read it for a long time. Presiding arbiter. His voice was steady. The intake timestamp is 11:04 this morning, 38 minutes before the dissolution had been ratified. The chamber was very quiet. What the document was, what I confirmed in the gallery log as Davin Arl began to read its contents aloud, per procedural requirement, was a unified standing declaration. All 7 envoys, all 7 signatures, a single credentialed instrument, executed simultaneously across 4 systems at the same timestamp, and submitted through the conclave's central intake channel by a 5th party whose authorization to act as joint filing agent had been granted under a procedural instrument filed 11 months prior, during the crisis's opening stage, before the conclave had decided the crisis was theirs to resolve. I will say that again, because when I wrote it into the gallery log I wrote it twice, which I have never done, 11 months prior. Before the dissolution resolution had even been drafted, before the member delegates had caucused on the language, before the conclave's legal chamber had issued its advisory note. Someone in the Earth mission had looked at what the conclave was moving toward and filed the authorization instrument for a joint filing agent, while the conclave was still deciding it had a problem to solve. The conclave's legal chamber had estimated 14 months to 2 years to assemble a unified filing. The filing had been assembled in 11 months, while the conclave was debating whether to dissolve them. Using a procedural channel, the conclave's own advisory note had described as Earth's available remedy, the same note that had been issued the morning after the dissolution, as though it were new information. The conclave's dissolution order, by the terms of its own legal chamber's interpretive note, dissolved the fragmented standing. The unified standing declaration had already replaced it. The dissolution order, ratified by 31 votes at 11:42 that morning, had formally cleared the ground for the instrument filed at 11:04 to take full effect. The conclave had, with great procedural care, dissolved a thing that was already gone and activated the thing that replaced it. Sorel did not speak for a long moment. Around the floor, the delegates who had remained were very still. I watched the delegate from the Sorven Third Sovereignty, a councillor named Drev Orath who had seconded the dissolution motion with some satisfaction, put down the notes he had been reviewing. He put them down carefully, the way you put things down when you need your hands free to think. The delegate beside him, Sorath Keln of the 7th Allied Reach, had pushed back from his station by a small degree, not rising, not reacting visibly, just making room, as though the chamber had subtly changed its dimensions, and he had not yet adjusted to the new ones. Calavorn had not moved. She and the 6 behind her were standing in that same quiet patience, their arms at their sides, their faces composed. They were not watching Sorel, they were watching each other, in the peripheral way of people who have been through something long together, and do not need to look directly to confirm the other is still there. Sorel said, "The filing will be entered into permanent record." Vorn nodded once. The 7 of them turned together, same cadence, same pace, and walked back through the chamber doors. I wrote the time in the gallery log, 12:04. 22 minutes from entrance to exit, the severance crisis, 3 years in the building, resolved in the time it takes to eat a meal. What the conclave did next, I also logged. The legal chamber filed an internal review the following morning. The review concluded 16 days later, with a determination that the unified standing declaration was procedurally valid, and that Earth mission's standing was not merely restored, but had, technically, never lapsed. The dissolution having cleared a fragmented state, that the unified filing had already superseded. 3 delegates moved to challenge the review. The challenge was dismissed at intake. The 7 vacant seat plaques were turned face up again. I watched a conclave floor attendant do it, working quietly during a recess, one by one down the line. I have been in that gallery for 14 years. I have recorded constitutional amendments and succession disputes, and a session that ran for 11 days without anyone agreeing on a single thing. I have logged filings and motions and procedural instruments in a language that is designed, above all, to be precise. What I logged that morning was precise. 31 delegates voted to dissolve a diplomatic corps that had already, 11 months prior, decided to become one. They passed the vote at 11:42. The unified thing they were trying to prevent was already in the intake channel at 11:04. The only thing the vote dissolved was the fragmentation. They had not closed the crisis. They had finished it for them.